Warriors. I am very excited today to bring to you Dan Turner. Powerthefuture.com is the website. We're going to jump right in because I want you to hear Dan's voice. It's 2024. And I want all of you to understand what is going on with energy, the whole subject of energy, the green agenda, clean energy. It is just a big, I think, a big pot of confusion going on out there. And today, children are being, and our teens, our youth, a lot of young people are just hearing one side of everything, in my opinion. So Dan is here to explain what and why he started Power the Future. And also, we're going to talk about all the misconceptions, what you need to dig into, what you need to educate yourselves about. And we want all of you to learn the truths and facts about energy. We're not going to worry because we've got the foremost expert in my book here, Dan Turner, joining us. And we're going to also throw in how energy is affecting the environment. I don't know. We got Dan's going to teach us about everything. First, I want to say you are Dan. You are the founder and executive director of Power the Future, with the mission of offering truths, facts, and research that will enrich the national conversation on energy and supporting workers in the energy field. We don't talk enough, Dan, about supporting all of the workers. And the website, everyone, is powerthefuture.com. Also, you can follow on Twitter at powerthefuture. Dan, now I'll let you speak. Welcome to the Warriors. How are you?
Oh, it's great to be on with you. Thanks for having me. It's a Happy New Year to you and your wonderful audience.
Well, thank you. It's a great way to kick off the new year. We are determined to provide information that everybody needs to know about. But first, before we jump into all of that, Dan, I know you're a native of New York, my home state, as I sit here in the middle of New York City. Let's hear a little bit about you, Daniel Turner. What would you like to share with us about, anything when you were a kid, adult, anything you want us to know about?
Yeah. Well, I was also born and raised in New York City. My entire family is still there. I identified very early on as a rural American. So I actually
Really?
am on my sheep farm in rural Virginia in Shenandoah. But I'll always call New York home. It will always be in my heart. And sometimes my accent comes back very heavily. But I started Power of the Future maybe because of that bridge between urban and rural. And I've always loved the energy issue. I've been doing politics for a long time. And what bothered me about energy policy and why I felt this organization was necessary was that there's a huge disconnect between the men and women who make our energy policy. And they do hail from places like New York or DC or San Francisco, and the millions of people who are impacted by that. And we're very flippant, and policymakers are very flippant. The best example, day one of the Biden administration, we're going to shut down Keystone. Well, those are 11,000 people that don't come from New York City or San Francisco or Boston or any place cool and sophisticated, right? They're from small towns all across America who work in this industry. And kind of no one cared, right? It was like, wow, that's fine. 11,000. We're going to close this coal mine. They get applause. Michael Bloomberg has a mission to shut down every coal mine left in America. He doesn't see the men and women in rural Wyoming or in West Virginia whose jobs are on the line. And so Power of the Future tries to bridge that divide and be a voice for rural American energy workers in the power circles of Washington, D.C.
I love that, Dan, because that is something that is missing. I know you're out there. You're on many different outlets from Fox and OANN. You've certainly written. You've been on hundreds of radio programs, including State of the Nation, which we did on TNT Radio. Also, Lynn's Warriors right now. It's easy for billionaires like Michael Bloomberg to right, throw around all this kind of talk. We don't talk about the real people across. I mean, you do across America, and that's what we want to focus on here at the Warriors. Let me ask you something. First of all, I want to throw in that Dan, once a New Yorker, always a New Yorker. I don't care if you're
exactly
on the sheep farm. And actually, I'm kind of jealous. That sounds actually delightful. And but once a New Yorker, always a New Yorker. Why do you think? I have so many questions for you. So let me just throw a few at you. Why do you think the government just can't handle all of these issues? Collectively, that's kind of a loaded question. I mean, why can't we have the truths, the facts about green and about our workers? Why can't we just do it all? Why does it have to be just one-sided? What are your thoughts on
Yeah.
that?
Yeah, main reason why is because the folks who make these decisions are just very poorly educated on these issue, and they are ignorant. And I mean that in the literal Greek definition of the word, without knowledge. And ignorance is curable. It's why we have education. It's why we have groups like mine, which are trying to educate policymakers and decision makers. Ignorance is curable, but there is sometimes deliberate and willful ignorance where people don't want to learn facts. And I think that's kind of where we are. So I have these energy conversations all the time. I've testified before Congress where a member of Congress will say, we need to switch to renewable wind and solar and get off fossil fuels. And I'll reply, but Congressman, wind and solar are made from fossil fuels. In fact, you use more fossil fuels to make solar panels and wind turbines to make electricity than if you just burnt those fossil fuels directly to make electricity. So we're not using fewer fossil fuels. We're just using them differently. What's green about that? And they'll look at you and say, we need to get off fossil fuels and switch to wind and solar. And so you're in this cycle of ignorance. Yeah, it's a complete circle of dumb that just self-perpetuates. And that's kind of where we are. And that wouldn't be a huge problem if they didn't have the power to execute policy. And that is where we are now. People look at, why is their food so expensive? Why is everything, it all comes down to energy prices. And now that all Americans are feeling it, I'm hoping that will be the impetus, especially headed towards an election. I'm hoping that will be the impetus for people to say, yeah, I don't want this anymore. I don't want to pay $4.75 for a dozen eggs. I don't want to pay $11.50 for ground beef, right? Something has to change. And what needs to change is our energy policy, which is making everything very, very expensive.
Exactly, Dan. As you point out, it's really the basis of everything. I like to say, I kind of think of it as, I'm big on kind of analogies so people can understand, like a wheel with a lot of spokes, but at the
Yeah.
basis of it is this energy. And Dan, you're so right, because when I started working in Washington about 5 years ago, I was amazed because I actually thought like the Congress people understood bills they were voting on.
No.
And then I learned, oh, well, these are, 500, 1,000 pages. And as they walk
Yeah.
down the hallways with a legislative aide, and I heard it for myself when I started paying attention, which way should I vote?
Yeah.
So there's such a lack of knowledge, such a lack. But here's what I don't buy, Dan. They're, as you pointed out, they're making, the rules for all of us, and they're not understanding the issues. How can we better, other than constantly like hammering them appropriately with our facts and truths, get at them to change their minds, and also get at their, a lot of the most important people are those legislative aides. So they understand, because let's face it, the reality is they're telling them how to vote as they walk down the hallways for the most part, a lot of them.
Yeah.
What should we do? I mean, you're not a lobbyist, correct? Power of the Future is
No,
not a lobbyist,
we
right?
don't
Lynn's
lobby.
Warriors, we're not a lobbyist. We walk
Mhm.
around and just promote what we're working on.
Mhm.
What would be a better way in Washington? Obviously, you pointed out you've been in front of Congress. You talk to people, including our children's issues. With the Warriors.
Mhm.
What do we have to do to wake them up? Because this 118th Congress, I'm sort of digressing here, Dan. Stick with me on this one. Very
All good.
ineffective. No, this is proof.
Yeah.
If you laid out everything that has gotten done with this Congress, ineffective,
Yeah.
ineffective. Now they're going to start up again soon. How can we really get their attention with all of
Yeah,
this?
the activism is the most important way. I was a Hill staffer some 20 years ago. Your member of Congress does not like when the phone is ringing off the hook. And that's why you see those TV ads, and they are effective. X HR 327, call Senator blah blah blah, and tell her to vote no. People run those ads. Now that is lobbying, right? We don't do those type of ads. But those ads are effective because people do pick up the phone. And if you're the senator's office and good morning, Senator Turner's office, and it's, hey, I saw, they don't like that. They really don't like being bothered. You know what's something that I would love to do? And it's like, I wish I had a side project, and maybe it will be great for you to your audience to do. Pre-COVID, it was very, very common in recess, and especially in the summer, to have town halls. Right? It was common for your member of Congress during the summer recess and winter recess to go to the local high school gym or the local Rotary Club and take questions from the audience. And they hated doing it, quite honestly. It was part of the job, but they hated it. The Tea Party brought a sense of anger right during the Obama years because people were saying, what's going? And that made it worse. But they kept going. But then COVID happened, and it was like, whoa, no more town halls.
Right.
And no one has taken them up again. And I'm amazed that, summer was, I guess, 6 months ago at this point. My members of Congress, where I'm in Virginia, my two senators, not one town hall. They all took vacation. And that would be the best thing that people can do, is reach their
Yeah.
member of Congress and say, hey, Congressman, I'm going to keep using my last name, Congressman Turner, we expect you to come to, the Warren G. Harding High School gym and answer questions for us and demand that they show up, because that's their damn job, right? That is their job as the members of Congress, as to represent your voice, is to be in touch with their constituents. I think that would be the most effective way. No one has called for resurrecting that practice, which was very common for the last 200 some odd years, died during COVID, and both sides are thrilled to not have to do town halls ever again. And that has to stop.
Dan, I'm glad you brought that up because, first of all, let's break it down. All of these issues we talk about are really bipartisan issues, right? Good,
Mhm.
good for America, the American public, Americans, our country. I have tried here in New York. We know it's a Democratic, state. Doesn't matter, to do exactly that. COVID changed everything. People
Yeah.
don't even want to take meetings, okay, at
Yep.
all. That is the part I am very offended about. They work for us, our
Yeah.
taxes pay them, they represent us. And that is why, as you pointed out, I'm always getting the public. One of our big rallying cries is always, House.gov, Senate.gov, find out who represents you if you don't know, call their office, email their office. If you're so inclined, put a stamp on a letter, do all of this and bring up the issues, because you pointed out they don't want to be bothered. They don't
No.
but if they get a bunch of people, bothering them about the issue, perhaps they might take a step or two. I'm very disappointed in we can't have more at the community level, more grassroots in all the different states, for the public to come out, because they're worn down, which I guess
Yeah.
is what everybody's trying to do: overwhelm everybody, wear them down, so they ignore these important issues.
Yeah.
Okay, now Dan, let's get into it. Give us the overall landscape right now in America about energy. Just
Mhm.
go for it. Fill us in what we need to know.
Yeah. There's always been a movement, um, since the 1850s, since Marx himself, to take over sectors of the society, whether it's education, whether it's industry. Um, I think energy is just one of those issues that the left has always wanted to take over. It's about control. It's why every dictator who's ever come into power, first thing they do is they seize the energy industry, and take over, all energy production. Energy is the largest industry in America right now that is still in the hands of the private sector. It used to be healthcare. Obamacare changed that very much. And of course, it's been wonderful, right? Everyone loves Obamacare. We love paying 300% more for healthcare than we did just 15 years ago. If you ask the left about Obamacare, they'll tell you it's great. They had a
Yeah.
party a couple years ago to celebrate its anniversary. Your average American is paying literally 300% more for your healthcare premiums. As a healthy single 25-year-old guy should not be paying $400 a month for healthcare, but we are now because of Obamacare. But that's another rant.
That's another
Energy now
show.
is the largest. Energy is now the largest industry that is still in the hands of the private sector. Yes, there are publicly traded companies, but it's in the hands of the private sector. If you're a leftist, if you're a statist, a collectivist, whatever you want to use that phrase, and Joe Biden is truly that, that can't continue, right? Government has to control this industry. Government has to be in charge. And so every effort that we see under the guise of climate change, protecting the environment, children with asthma, pollution, whatever phrase you want to use, protecting waters and rivers, all of it is a pretext for government to take over control of this industry. Joe Biden doesn't believe in freedom. He doesn't believe in free markets. He believes in government. It's why all of his solutions always are about building and expanding and growing the size of government. Every government bureaucrat just got their largest raise in 50 years, starting this year, thanks to Joe Biden. Proof of why that's wrong is to go back to the previous administration. When President Trump began his administration in January of 2017, and he let the energy industry do what it does best, which is produce energy, right? They are not, I am, but they're not PR gurus. They're not spin doctors. I get this question all the time. Why is the energy industry so bad at defending itself? That's not their job. They're good at producing energy. They're good at mining coal. They're good at extracting oil and gas and bringing it to market. When they're allowed to do that, as Donald Trump allowed it in 2017, they produced more energy for less money for the greatest number of people, employing the highest number of people, generating the greatest amount of revenue for the treasury, lowering emissions more than any other country in the world. So when freedom is allowed to operate, you know what, for 4 years, we never had one congressional hearing on price gouging or profiteering. We've had 5 since the Biden administration, and people like Elizabeth Warren. I'm going to bring those CEOs and I'm going to demand that they are, stealing from the American.
Right.
How come when the big oil shill, as they call Donald Trump, how come when big oil was in control, we never had allegations of price gouging and profiteering and collusion? We didn't have oil at, what is oil today, 73 a barrel? Oil averaged $48, $50 a barrel. Pollution levels went down. The price of all goods went down. So when the free markets are allowed to operate, when this industry is allowed to operate, we don't do bad. We do actually quite good. And the converse of that is what we've seen with the Biden administration: state control, we're in charge. Department of Interior, EPA, mandates coming out of the White House, John Kerry, Gina McCarthy. We're going to take away your stove, your gas hot water heater, your leaf blower. Everyone needs to drive an EV. And all of these government decisions, has it made life better? Has it made it cheaper? What has it done to the overall economy? So that's the 30,000-foot context where we have these two ideological battles. And it's not pollution versus clean air. It's not left even versus right. It is freedom versus statism versus really Marxism. And when freedom is allowed to operate, it works so much better, which is why I gave the Obamacare example. When the government controls things seem to go an awful lot worse. And that's where we're headed with energy. God willing, in 11 months, we can reverse that trend and get some freedom back, because Obamacare is never getting undone, right? We had that one chance and it didn't happen. So that is the new normal now. The new normal is I pay $450 a month for healthcare, as do you. That's the new normal. And what the Biden administration is trying to do with energy is make this the new normal. Hey, that's what the utility bills cost. That's the way it is now. And that's the consequence of, and Americans have to realize, no, this is not normal. We can go back to the good old days. We also can in Obamacare, but we need a lot more political will. Sorry, long answer, but big context.
No, because I have several shows I want to do with you, because all of these issues, here's the thing, Dan, other than like Fox or Newsmax, this is what the American public needs, exactly what you just laid out. They're not able to hear this on a mass, media for the most part. That's why we turn to Lynn's Warriors or State of the Nation or other alternative, in addition to, the Fox, the usual players and all that. Because if people really could understand these issues, I always say I back off, especially over the holidays or a lot of parties. Somebody came up to me, they're like, "Are you a Trumper?" I just walked away. Like, I'm at a holiday party. Please, we're over that. That was 5 years ago. Whatever. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I'm an American is always my answer. Like, I'm an American and I walk off. Were we better, as you just pointed out, 4 or 5 years ago? Yeah. That's what it's all about. And that's the part I don't understand. And that brings me to my next question, Dan. I'm so concerned about our youth, our young people who, on both sides, I do a lot of focus groups with young people, kids, with the Warriors. And both sides, believe it or not, are very concerned about climate, energy. They're, in my opinion, kind of brainwashed, coerced into thinking the narrative that's put out there for the most part. And that's what I'm trying to undo by, bringing you to the platform today. Let's get the truths and facts out there. Do you ever speak to kids at all? Is that part of what you do at all, or no?
It's very hard to, because the groups or the institutions that have audiences of children don't normally allow folks like me to talk to them. I've tried to speak at my own alma mater in New York City, at my high school, and I can't even get an invitation to speak there. I do believe Andrew Cuomo is still on their Hall of Fame, despite the sex scandals, despite thousands of seniors being killed in COVID nursing homes. He's still prominently, Archbishop Malloy, I'll give you a shout out, guys. He's still prominently in their Hall of Fame, but I am not necessarily allowed to speak about climate change. And I would love to speak to high school kids. I'd love to have a robust, this honest, ask me a question, because
Right.
they are scared, but without sounding condescending to children, I'm just going to be very honest. I was also scared of, Friday the 13th when I was a kid. I was scared of Jason and Freddy Krueger. They use fear on children because it's easy to
Yes.
scare children. And so children are afraid of climate change because they've been told for their little tiny short lives, 10, 15, 18 years, they've been told repeatedly that the planet's about to explode because of climate change. So they are understandably, but how evil is that? Right? How evil is that to do that to children? The reason why the climate agenda dies as you get older is because you do hit a certain age. I'm going to be 50 this year. I'm very excited about my big 50. I'm
You're a
going to be 50
baby.
this year, but but I've been, since high school, I can remember going back again to Archbishop Malloy. I can remember being told about climate change and how we're all going to die of global warming. And we almost are in like phenomenological studies of climate where it's all experiential. And at a certain point, you're like, you know what? I've heard this crap for so long. Like, I remember the UN report in '89. I was a sophomore because we talked about it, that said that the Maldives and Bangladesh were going to be underwater by the year 2000. I remember when Al Gore's movie came out. I remember when John Kerry first testified. I remember when Michael Mann testified before Congress and they threw the snowball. I've been doing this crap for so long. That's like, oh, wow. Another prediction that the world's going to end this year. You know what? I'm going on 35 years. I've been hearing that. I don't know if I buy another prediction, but that doesn't work when you're 14. So we can't say, well, let them grow up, because that's wrong. It's wrong to torture these children. And they are. I mean, you see kids on Capitol Hill, they are genuinely afraid, and that's evil to do that to children because you have an agenda. But that's the radical left for you. Evil is second nature to them, quite frankly.
And that's why Dan, I'm trying to really get at our youth as much as I can be allowed to speak. Again, being in New York City, I speak a lot in New Jersey, Connecticut, also Democratic. I also speak to a lot of parent groups, because I believe if we educate the parents to get around the schools that don't allow you or me to come in, frankly, if I can get at the parents or the guardians and the grandparents. I have a lot of grandparents that seek out information.
I join you anytime in these forums, by the way. I mean, I'll come up on my own dime.
It's coming up because 2024, I'm going full steam. I'm getting back into Washington starting February, just to preach the facts, the truths. Here's what you need to know. Mm-hmm. Why I'm a little angry. I don't think angry is a good word. I shouldn't use that word. I'm a little fired up in 2024. We know what the Democrats, progressives, lefts, I don't really know their names, whatever they're calling themselves. Oh, let me just throw in Dan. So I guess you're not invited anytime soon to speak at Harvard, I would assume.
No,
my
attempt
at humor on the Warriors, okay, we'll leave that one for, but I want to get back there. I'm actually talking in front of the Senate and DOJ on February 6th. Mm-hmm. And the last time I did this last year, now, remember, I don't take government money or anything like that. And I speak truths, facts. I promote other organizations. I'll promote, Power the Future. I don't do your work, but I'll promote it. It's truths and facts. That's what we do with the Warriors. We promote good work, affects all of us, families, kids. If I tell you, Dan, and this was kind of a closed group, I want to say it was about 30 people tops, that they just stared at me. Because then a year ago, I was talking about AI, again, another program, artificial intelligence, but why we can't. Why is the last child safety regulation from 1998? We've had nothing new for kids since 1998. So we have to really get back there. But here's why I'm fired up, Dan. I want the Republicans, whatever, conservative, right? Again, I don't like labels, but they need to step up more. I am sorry. We're in an election year. More people are in tune. I don't want to use the word awake because I don't like woke, wake, whatever. More people have certainly, with everything that has gone on in the last few years, are waking up. I'll use that. Are asking questions, asking me, Dan, on a daily basis, like, what should I do? I don't know. Will it matter? We need whatever what to really fight back appropriately. And I'm not
Yeah.
understanding. You have any thoughts on that? Why they just don't take off the gloves? I say appropriately. We are peaceful warriors. Um,
Yeah.
and just come together in a group. Come together with you. Why don't you have 50 people, from Capitol Hill? Maybe you do, and I don't know about it, or it's coming up. Standing with you, and okay, now we're going to have a forum today on Capitol
Yeah.
Hill. Like we need to actually do that and invite the offices and get these issues, the education piece out. Why won't they do it?
Yeah, I think it's a great point, and I am with you 100%. I think America now is like that fixer-upper that a couple bought, and then they move in and they realize, okay, it's not just like a bad roof and some painting. Like the foundation is destroyed, the plumbing, the electric, and one day you're sitting in the middle, and I've done this as I've renovated houses. One day you're sitting in the middle of the house, and you're like, what am I into? Like you don't even know where to start.
Right.
And I think that is deliberately why we are seeing all these problems. There's a reason why there's a crisis at the border. It's not just, that there's lots of theories and I have my own beliefs as to why it's happening. But it's deliberate, right? But why? But it also keeps people focused on that. And then there's a reason why this is happening. There's a reason why we don't have real education reform. There's a reason why. And so we're in this fixer-upper stage that if we could solve one problem and move on to the next, things would eventually get better. But if you're vested in the power of government perpetuating itself, you can't fix problems. Quite frankly, and both sides of this are equally guilty. But since the Democrats were the last ones to have super majorities, we'll use them as an example. Biden won in 2020. It was inaugurated 2021. They had the House and the Senate. Where was their gun control legislation? They're calling for it now, right? Everyone is running on it for a campaign issue. They had both chambers. They could have passed gun control. They didn't. They could have passed the Green New Deal. They didn't. They had to lie, and they had to call it the Inflation Reduction Act. And then as soon as it passed, because inflation was rampant, it still is. But then once it passed, they said it's actually an investment in climate issues. Where were all of the things that they claimed that, ask Karine Jean-Pierre about the border. She'll say, you know what? We need comprehensive immigration reform. Where was your legislation? You had both chambers for 2 years. And my point is, no one really wants to fix problems in DC because you don't make any money fixing problems. You make money in
Right.
talking about fixing problems and running on fixing problems and running on when I am elected speaker, I will, and then I'm the speaker. And it's like, well, actually, I can't do it now, but if you elect me again, and we perpetuate these problems. And I think that's why we don't see the right coalescing better, because there's so many problems coming from every single side, and it's deliberate because there are lots of vested interests. DC, how many beautiful offices along K Street with mahogany walls and glass and I've had tea served to me before in these offices that I wonder where the budget. Those people are not giving up their livelihood anytime soon to solve a problem, whether it's life issues, whether it's border issues, whether it's health. No, like my livelihood depends on these problems existing in perpetuity. And I'm going to be damn sure these problems exist in perpetuity. As you can tell, I'm not a huge fan of DC government right now these days.
Well, you know what? I'm not either, Dan, but I backed off a lot last year, and also my work schedule didn't allow. I was managing 3 different radio programs and the Warriors, and to just jump on trains and hop down to DC. This year, I'm going full fledged in because I decided I have to put my big old face in front of people and say my 2 cents
God bless
appropriately,
you.
and just keep. Thank you, and to you too. We'll talk further about. I mean, we have to do it now. I really believe this 2024. You're a baby. I'm turning 63 in 2 weeks actually from today. And I've never felt more energetic, more powerful, more that I know I'm right about certain issues, and that it's our duty now. We are in this election year, 2024. I think it's like no other. I mean, I was a kid during Vietnam, and
Yeah.
I don't know, Dan, in those days, like even as kids, we were more aware, maybe just because there were 3 news stations or something, and we saw that at night. But like, I I really believe this is a changing point for America. We do a lot of border work. I'll leave that for another program, and that's just, now I'm in the middle of New York City. In the last 3 months, the streets here are incredibly different. And I'm a
Yeah.
lifelong, New Yorker. I've never seen what I see going on, and with no end in sight, no solution to any of this. So when you point out, people will say, why is this happening? Well, why do we have child trafficking? Why do we have the border? Why do we have, because it makes a lot of money.
It
It
does.
makes and both sides, they're not going to rock the boat. That is just the truth, right? And I'm
Mhm.
also convinced this is just me, Dan, that once people leave Congress, they want to be on the boards of whether it's big tech, or a bank,
Mhm.
institution. So they want to
Mhm.
keep it. They'll just go so far.
Mhm.
With all of these issues. That's why I think it's up to us now to really get out there. I really do think we are fighting now something I never said before, Dan, like evil versus good, good versus evil. I think that's what we've come to with all these issues. So let
Absolutely.
me ask you, what would you suggest to a parent or a grandparent if they say, okay, Dan, I don't know anything about these issues.
Yeah.
In simple terms, what should I tell my teen, my 14-year-old? I'll just use that as an example. When they say, okay, well, what about you're poisoning the environment or something? They come to you and say something like that. What would you suggest they say?
Yeah, this is where I would love to have a rebrand of this conversation, and rather than fight a child on whether or not
Right,
climate change is real and we're all going to die,
right,
because and that is a necessary conversation to have. But pointing out someone's irrational phobias doesn't necessarily cure the phobia. So you
right,
have to
exactly.
rebrand the conversation. So yeah, your 15-year-old is petrified about the climate and is maybe he's even joining the Friday marches out of class because we need to do something for the climate. If the few times I have had a chance to talk to young people, I rebrand it and say, okay, I agree with you. We need to do something, right? We need to do something. We need to get away from fossil fuels. Let me ask you about your personal lifestyle. And this is where, New York City is a wonderful example of this because it is a fossil fuel intense lifestyle. The probably one of the most popular apps among 15-year-olds are the food deliveries. I have nieces and nephews who grew up in New York City. My brothers were shocked that they're like, the next thing I know, Uber Eats is pulling up to the house because my 15-year-old ordered food. I didn't know we were doing that, but yeah, they are. Do you ever Uber Eats or Postmates food delivery? Right? Will you give that up for climate change? Because obviously the vehicle, right, the packaging, will you just commit yourself to making your food and you will never Uber Eats any of that again, or Uber itself, right? Will you commit yourself to not taking an Uber? You can't say to your 15-year-old now to take the subway like I did. I started taking the subway at 13 to go to high school by myself. um, you can't necessarily say that because the subways are dangerous, but that would be another context to have. Makeup is all based on fossil fuels. Will you stop? Commit yourself to not wearing it, right? Like you're saying we need to do something, but look at the life that you live in this country. And it's such a life of excess and opulence and maybe too much. Right? That's another conversation. But it's such a life of abundance. It's such a life of abundance that the biggest problem facing our poor is obesity. Think about that, right? In most countries of the world, you're poor or not obese. And in America, our poorest citizens' biggest problem is obesity. That's how much abundance we have because of our fossil fuel lifestyle. What are you personally willing to sacrifice? There is, and I love to give this example, outside of Cheyenne, Microsoft is building a data center. It's several football fields in size, these enormous buildings. It will use more electricity than the city of Cheyenne itself, right? So this data center is going to
Wow.
use a lot of electricity, a lot of power. The purpose of that data center is to host the video game Call of Duty. So you got a 15-year-old son. Are you going to say to him, that's a lot of fossil fuels, a huge carbon footprint. Will you forego all of your video
Right.
games? Right? Will you give up Call of Duty and Fortnite and Uber? So until you're willing to make that commitment, you really, buddy, I love you. I love your enthusiasm, kiddo. But until you're willing to sacrifice, how do you get off on telling us we have to sacrifice, right? Like, are you going to the Hamptons this weekend? Are you going to, do you want to go to Europe? Do you want to go skiing? Your skis, your parka, your goggles, all made from oil. Will you give up skiing? Right, the gondola through the beautiful, pristine nature. Will you give that up, or do you want to go on a ski trip? Right, surfing, same deal. Kayaking, what are you going to sacrifice for the climate? And normally when you have a conversation with a 15-year-old like that, they realize I got a really good life, right? And 15-year-olds don't want to sacrifice. They don't.
Nothing.
So that's the
Right.
best way to tackle it, is to make them self-examine. Kids are not dumb. They can examine their own lifestyle and their excesses and their cell phones that they're glued to. Will you give up TikTok? Huge carbon footprint, let
Nobody's
alone the
given that up.
Chinese spying, right? But that's the best way
Yeah.
to talk to a kid about climate
Yeah.
change.
I think that's very, very smart. It's actually like meet them where they are.
Mhm.
It's kind of that's kind of what I think. You meet them and pointing out all these great examples, which of course, Dan, I'm stealing all of them from you. I will give you credit. But
No, 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 take them and make them
no,
yours. I love it.
no,
This
because
is our
my
job.
no, because I really want this is it for 2024. I want our youth. I am so upset. I am so worried. I have 3 adult children, but I'm worried about them. I'm worried
Mm.
about, grandchildren. I'm worried about just our youth, our future leaders, right? Like that's where we have to get at them and help them more understand these issues. And you laid that out perfectly. Look, I'm here in the middle of New York. I see people having delivered like one milkshake.
Yeah.
So there's like a guy, this is, as you know, all delivery, as you pointed out, but really bad since COVID. I mean, it'll be like one little paper cup with a tea bag sticking out.
Mhm.
That's what they have delivered.
It's
So think of
remarkable.
all that goes into that. It's crazy. So again, I'll be stealing all that information and using it, Dan. Um, let's figure out now. Powerthefuture.com is the website. How can the public help you? What do you want from them?
Disseminating our info is the most important, right? We put out a lot of content, and we need to get as many eyes on it as possible and make people have that click and say, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. That's always helpful. I love to speak. You can tell I'm, I'm still a New Yorker. So, but opportunities to speak at town halls. I've been doing a lot of town halls in rural America where they're trying to build wind and solar farms.
Oh, yeah, it's
And
another
I've
one.
been telling folks, look, I'm not telling you what to do on your farm. I don't want someone telling me what to do on my farm, but I do want to walk you through some of the things that maybe they're not telling you before you lease these 500 acres to a wind farm or a solar farm. And that's been really effective. And it hasn't gone over very well from green energy industries. They're not my friends anymore. Sadly, I didn't get invited to any of their holiday parties. But
Sorry.
but but those are, big factors before you build a wind farm on your land or a solar farm, knowing all that. So speaking at town halls is something I love to do. I would take any opportunity to speak to young people, but again, it's usually very, very hard, and young people are impressionable, and I get it. People are scared, um, but there's so much misinformation and just flat out lies. So that would be the
Lies.
most effective thing to do, is just share our content, find ways for us to talk to different audiences, and then talk to your localist elected officials about these issues. A lot of the green stuff is done at the local level. And the next thing you know, in small, beautiful county, whatever, or look at New York City Council, and suddenly the city council passes a mandate. By 2040, we need all of our electricity to come from wind and solar. Well, where are you going to build those wind and solar farms outside of New York City? I've done back of the envelope calculations for New York City. You need about 2 million acres of land to produce enough to have enough land for wind and solar to produce enough electricity for New York City. 2 million acres of land. Manhattan is 35,000 acres, right? Queens is 80,000 or so. So we're talking about 2 million acres of land. It's basically the size of Connecticut. So but the city council is too dumb to realize that. They just pass a law. By 2040, all of the electricity has to be wind and solar. Where's it coming from? We would have to put these wind and solar farms so far outside the city and run so many transmission cables, and electricity is lost over distance. But it's not feasible. So your dumb city council, our dumb city council, that's the best thing that people can do, is talk to their city council, get involved at the local level before these stupid laws take effect that leave taxpayers and ratepayers on the hook for terrible decisions they make. Get involved at the most local level. It's where the Greens are most effective and where they're the most dangerous, quite frankly.
Dan, we're twins because as I've gotten smarter in the last couple of years, I'm always pushing everybody, the city council at that local level, grassroots, because that's where a lot of decisions are made for your community. Get involved with that. What you just pointed out again, they don't know about. The 2
Mm.
million acres, they have not an idea. It's like I would say to people, and they were all upset a few months ago about the gas stoves and this and that. Every NYCHA, which is New York City Housing Authority, all of we used to call them projects. We used to call them, there's all
Yeah.
different names. Okay, I don't think they call them projects anymore, but public housing, assisted housing, it changes, Dan, every week, the name of it. But every stove in all of those buildings around New York City, those are all gas stoves. They're never going in and replacing, all of this and ripping out the microwaves and things. It's just not happening. So when people
No.
get so upset, I'm like, do you think they're coming in and ripping out no, they're just not doing that. Also, I want people to sign up. You have a newsletter, powerthefuture.com. So people
We
should.
do. Yeah, you can sign up for that. In New York City, what are there, 10 or 11 members of Congress from the city itself, maybe even more, I forget. It would be great to see even a green group make a pledge that they will never take a plane to DC. We've FOIA'd their records before. They all take the shuttle. Why don't
Oh,
any of
yeah.
you take Amtrak? Isn't it green? Eric Adams tweeted a photo of himself on the plane saying, I'm going to DC to talk to green Eric Adams. Why don't you take Amtrak, buddy? He doesn't want to take Amtrak, right? They keep telling us Pete Buttigieg is convinced we're all going to be taking choo-choo trains every day. But your members of your elected officials, not them. They take a plane. So that would be a fun thing to do. Make every single member of Congress, anyone in New York can FOIA their campaign information from the FEC.
Right.
What is Jerry Nadler spending his money on? How many flights has he taken to San Francisco to have a fundraiser? Why is he fundraising there? What's the carbon footprint of AOC's fundraisers in Los Angeles, right? There's a lot of things people can do to show the green hypocrisy, and that would be really helpful.
Dan, you just set me off because you mentioned Jerry Nadler, and I actually am a constituent of his. And I'm always upset with him continually.
Yeah.
But I'll just say that. And when I am in Washington and try to go to his office, I kid you not when I say it's the door's closed and locked. When I put my hand on the knob to turn it, thinking maybe the door's closed, I can go in. I'll just leave it at that.
No.
Again, I digress. So that's, and it's tough. But you know what? You just reminded me of something. Every year here in New York City in Central Park, they do this big climate festival. I think it's in June or so. It's hot weather. And it's in conjunction with like MSNBC. And they get in, like Lizzo and all these people to perform and the kids in the climate. Every year, Dan, when they leave, what do they do with their garbage, their signs? They throw them all over the streets, in the curbs, mass garbage every year now. I want to say for 10 years, I will turn to my husband and say, look at this. Yep. It's all about climate, clean, this, that. Look at what the streets look like. It's disgusting. Yep. So they don't understand. One more question. I'm very curious. Okay, we're in this election year. How come? What do you think about the candidates? Does anybody, what if they, I'm convinced if we just made it like one issue, not to confuse the public, maybe it's the energy issue. That's somebody's entire platform. Again, because as you pointed out, Dan, it's like everything spins out of that, right? Makeup, food delivery, everything is delivered. New York, they say, New York City, I've heard my entire life, maybe you can confirm this, we have supplies for 2 days. Like other than that, because we need trucks and we need, things coming here and this and that. And so what do you think about that? Who's talking about? Is anybody really talking about this I know we have Iowa in a few weeks, and not to get too political. Yeah. Is anybody focusing really on this platform? I'm not really hearing it. Are you? But maybe I'm missing something.
I think the first GOP debate had the most about energy. That was wonderful. The second had a little bit, but no, it's the analogy I used earlier of the fixer-upper. Other issues are taking precedence, right? The border, and these are all important issues, right? Israel-Gaza is an important issue. Ukraine's an important issue. The border is an important issue, but they are kind of the sexy ones now. And of course, you have to throw in half the debate has to be about abortion because that gets ratings and clicks and views. Right. So energy, and in a sense, I mind, of course, because energy is important. But in a sense, I'm not surprised because energy has always been a bipartisan kind of perfunctory issue, right? I mean, it really didn't start until the Obama administration deliberately said, we're going to go after coal. We're going to try to drive these businesses out of business. everyone's kind of, Bill Clinton believed in energy. We never had a climate agenda. Al Gore was talking about it like a lunatic, but everyone ignored Al Gore.
That's right.
So I'm not surprised energy issues aren't household, because they've never really had to be before. But they are now. I will say this about all the folks running on the GOP ticket: they're all good on energy. There were some who were bad on climate, but they're no longer in the race. I always think climate change is the slippery slope to socialism, right? Because it's so easy to just, you want to throw a nod to the left to get them off your back. So you're like, look, I'm not a crazy right-wing lunatic. Of course I believe in climate change. Aha. They gotcha. They're right. The climate change, as soon as you start speaking their language, like, look, no, I really think we eventually need to transition from fossil fuels. Done. That's how they get you. They want you to start, breaking little by little, and that's how they make it sound like you're troglodyte. You don't believe in science, right? And that's how they start going after you. So there are no bad candidates on our issues right now. Some stronger than others, but they're all good on energy, which is really, really positive for our future.
Okay, and I want you in there, Dan, behind the scenes. I want you prepping them. I want you beating them over the head with these issues. This is a very urgent issue, in my opinion, all of this. Finish us up. Anything we didn't cover, you want to leave us with some final words? I'm so thankful you're taking the time today to join me here so we can educate parents, the public, grandparents, trickling down. Again, my agenda of working with children, they need to understand, especially our teens, who are in such fear of everything these days. They're just, who could blame them? The adults are in fear, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
About everything, right? And the kids are very kids are savvy and smart. I'm always pointing that out because, again, in my focus groups, once I gain their trust, they'll always confide in me. Oh, my parents are busy. My father said, come back. I'm on the computer. Mom's on her phone all day. Like, the kids are watching everything. Mm-hmm. And that's a very big misconception that the adults have, like the kids aren't really watching or paying attention. I've even spoken to 4 and 5-year-olds that they're pretty savvy when you really get to start talking to them. And this has to change, all of this energy and climate. Leave us with any final thoughts we should know about.
I mean, first of all, I'm just thrilled to be on with you. Thank you, and to your audience as well. Anyone can email me a question, daniel@powerthefuture.com. If we didn't address it here, I'll come back anytime you'll have me, because we could talk about energy and foreign policy. We can talk about why energy policies led to the invasion of Ukraine, why they led to war in the Middle East. We can talk about food prices. We can talk about medicine and agriculture policy when it comes to energy. I mean, it really is an issue that undergirds the rest of the economy, and there are so many ways we could talk about it, that I'd love to just continue this conversation anytime you'll have me. But yeah, if people have questions, whether we can talk about climate change, I'd love to talk about climate change. But yeah, shoot me a question, daniel@powerthefuture.com. Tell me I'm a moron. Tell me I'm wrong. Tell me, send me your study, right? I mean, that's the best, is I have a study that shows, oh yeah, well, I saw yesterday on TV a new study that came out that said that cholesterol was leading to dementia. And it's like, well, I thought, are we back to cholesterol? I've heard cholesterol was good, then there's bad cholesterol. It's, remember the margarine craze of the 80s, right? Studies came out that said butter is bad for you. Now butter is good for you. Is butter going to be bad? Science says that the earth is going to come to an end. Oh yeah, science tells me red wine is good for me. It's bad for me. Coffee's good for me. Chocolate. What's the deal with coffee? Is coffee good for you today or bad? I can find a study that says everything is good and bad for me. I can find a study that says if we stand 6 feet apart on the tarmac, right, where we're preventing COVID spread, but as soon as I get that on the plane, I'm going to sit next to you shoulder to shoulder. I can find studies that say masks work and mask doesn't work. So I'd love to have a conversation about science. The science says climate change. Oh yeah. Science says beef is good for me. Science says beef is bad for me. Science says literally dairy is good for me. Dairy is bad for me. Science says gluten is good for me. Gluten is bad for me. What does the science say about COVID? What does the science say about vaccines? What does the science say about Dr. Fauci? Science can say whatever the heck you want science to say. I'd love to talk about the science of climate change.
Oh, I would love that. You just make my mind go crazy there, Dan. How dare you? Because there are, and it also depends who. Did you ever watch, Dan? I'm getting off track here, but I think it's called Food Inc. It was a
Yes.
documentary. I'll just leave
Great.
it at that. That
Yes.
is something, I have to get back on that. Tell people to watch that and understand. They'll tell you whatever they want to tell you, kind of thing.
Yeah. I just
Um,
tweeted earlier that I don't know why I was thinking of it because I do have my farm, but it is illegal to buy raw milk, right? And that is because science says it's not good for you. But yet the same government's talking about legalizing heroines and psychedelic mushrooms.
oh,
And I did tweet that. I'm like, explain that one to me, right? I literally bought raw milk from my neighbor. I could be arrested. Um, but now we're like, smoking is bad for you, but you can smoke weed absolutely anywhere and it's totally fine. Explain that one to me.
well,
So
I don't know. I mean, being in the middle of New York City, the streets reek of this horrible,
I
disgusting
know,
pot smell. I'm
awful.
talking every neighborhood. Not
Yeah.
there's no exceptions. I'm sensitive. My lips like actually burn sometimes, and I'm not kidding. But I say to myself, Dan, I'm glad my kids aren't babies or something,
Yeah.
that I'm living in the city with them, or teens, and just, inhaling this or seeing that this is allowed to go
Yeah.
on. Again, this is another program what I've been
But
seeing
the
lately.
science says marijuana is good for you, and
Really?
the science also says it's bad for you. Which one? I don't know. The government
Well,
decided they're going to take one study, not the other. But when it comes to climate change, your study is good, but that study is no good. So that would be a fun show to talk about just science, because again, being of a certain age, that was why I talked about this. We've lived enough to know the science of global cooling, the science of chlorofluorocarbons and the ozone layer, the science of killer bees were supposed to get us, right? Acid rain. Remember the acid rain craze of the 80s? I remember it as a kid.
I mean,
I was
I remember it, but
petrified. In New York City, I was
yeah, I remember
petrified
it.
because they would do TV shows about it in New York. Science, please. Don't give me
Well,
your
look,
science mumbo. The science. You don't believe in science. Oh, give me your
I
science.
remember,
Anyway.
Dan. I think I was in fourth grade. We had our first Earth Day, maybe. Could have been 19 like 70. Maybe it was like around there. Don't hold me to it.
Earth Day
70s.
started in 1970.
Okay,
Yeah.
then that it was. And I think I was in fourth grade. I would have been 9 years old. But the whole thing was, we're destroying the earth and we're
Yep.
throwing garbage around. Like, so we all had to go outside with the nuns. I went to all girls, nuns, and we all had to like go into the town and like pick up litter.
Yeah.
Because I actually remember when I was a kid, people would just throw garbage out their car windows and they were like
Yeah.
driving. It just
Huge problem in the
like
70s. Yep.
but that was like our whole thing. Like, we're destroying. Then it got worse, Dan, because as I got older and used a little too much information, but as I started using hairspray, okay, all of a sudden we can't have hairspray because it's destroying the ozone layers.
Yep.
And that's where they came up with like pumps or something for bottles.
Yep.
But it is destroying. You're destroying everything with the hairspray. But I say to you, Dan, to your point, if you go to any of these drugstore chains today, you will see aisles of hairspray with those old-fashioned Aquanet sprayer nozzle things. So
Yep.
that again goes into what we're talking about. You just got to listen to your heart, follow through with facts and truths. And that's what you're doing. So we have a lot of shows in
Thank
our
you.
future, Dan. Get ready. I'm going to keep that in mind because I'd like to do some more things in Washington as we go along and put issues together, and have a day on Capitol Hill is something I'm working on. I want these important issues discussed. So we will continue talking.
Thank you.
Powerthefuture.com. Thank you for taking the time and joining me. You are certainly I'm going to call you our energy warrior. Do you like that title?
I love that title. I'd be honored to. Thank you. And thank you for having me on your show. It's been a fun conversation. As you can tell, the other thing about you that I love, we're happy warriors, right? We're not
Yeah.
angry and bitter. We're
Oh,
not
no.
laying down in traffic and scream. We're happy people, right? These are serious issues, but we are happy
you got it.
people, and it's nice to see.
We're peaceful warriors. I like to point that out. I also, you know what? You just made me think of something else. Sorry, Dan, but you know what it is? It's like, I want to hear what everybody has to say.
Mhm.
Even the craziest thing, like, as long as you're not harming children or animals, like I want to have a discussion about it, like critical analysis. Let's dissect it. Oh, okay. Maybe you have a point there. Let's talk about it. And then, like you were saying, like, present facts, for instance, to kids. Okay. But you get your one milkshake delivered, Uber Eats or something like that. But see, you and me do things like that. I will just leave it at a lot of people. They can't do it. They won't engage in a truthful discussion. And I find that because, again, I will say I'm old enough, coming to school here at NYU. I grew up in New Jersey, and then I came to New York at 18. And NYU, we would have, Dan, did you ever hear of these like salons? Like you're
Oh,
a
sure.
lot younger, but we would sit around like downtown. It was every kind of person you could imagine, okay, and have these discussions. Did they get heated? Sure, things got heated.
Mm.
But like everybody left at the end, everybody was friends, everybody was having cheese and crackers at the end or going to the coffee shop. Like there was none of this um, um, hatred and none of this. I will not discuss it, or I can't talk to you anymore. I crave for those
Mm.
times that we can get back
Yeah.
to salons. I don't know if will ever happen. I'm attempting to make it happen. It's just funny. People like you turn out for my salons that want to, they don't want to talk about some of these issues. But I'm determined. I'm determined going
Yeah.
forward. We're going to get back to open and honest, critical discussion. Again, we're going to aim to our young people, educating parents and grandparents, get the facts out there. And you're a tremendous warrior. Powerthefuture.com. Thank you so much. I'm going to say to you, God bless you for doing this work. God bless you for smiling. We have to smile. No, but you know what? I'm not letting you go, Dan. Every time I'm going to say goodbye to you, every time I go to like a supermarket lately, I think to myself, wow, look at all the food we have available to us.
Mm.
As much as everybody is complaining this and that about our country or the horror, this and that, we have so much good still very much available to us.
Mhm.
If I was in one of those countries like Venezuela with 3 kids, I'd probably come here too
Yeah.
and try to get here, right? And try to get my kids into a better life. So we have to take into consideration and remind everybody also there's so much good here. And we also have to laugh and we have to smile and just empower each other. And you're doing that each and every day. So Dan Turner, powerthefuture.com, all to be continued. Happy New Year to you and your beautiful family. Go feed
Thank
your
you.
sheep now or whatever you're doing on the farm. And I'm going to go out and fight the fumes of the marijuana outside my apartment. Thank you so much, Dan.
Thank you.
Happy New Year. Talk again
Real
soon.
pleasure.
Take care. Bye-bye.